We like to believe almost instinctively that our parents did the best they could. It is a comforting thought, a way of softening the sharp edges of memory. And maybe, in their own way, they truly did. They gave what they had, with the tools, beliefs, and wounds available to them at the time. But the truth is rarely simple. What happens when the choices they made, the words they said, the words they never dared to speak, the gestures of affection or the silence of absence, continue to shape and even haunt us long after childhood is gone? What happens when the echo of their influence reaches into our adult lives, shaping how we love, how we trust, and most painfully, how we treat ourselves? This is the hidden inheritance, the kind of silent pain few dare to acknowledge. It is the pain of being wounded by those who were meant to protect us. Such pain often wears disguises. It hides behind excuses whispered across generations. We hear phrases like, "That's just how things were back then," or "They had such a difficult life, they didn't know any better." These explanations carry fragments of truth, but they do not erase the scars. The wound remains, quietly influencing how we connect, how we set boundaries, how we measure our worth. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist who explored the depths of the human psyche, warned us of this very phenomenon. He argued that our childhood experiences leave permanent imprints in the unconscious mind. What we do not make conscious, he said, will continue to direct our lives from the shadows, and we will call it fate. In those shadows lie the echoes of our earliest relationships, most of all with our parents. Consider the history of family itself. For centuries, children were seen less as individuals with inner worlds and more as extensions of family duty or survival. In ancient Rome, the pater familias, the father of the household, held the right to decide the fate of his children, including life or death. In medieval Europe, children were often sent away as apprentices before adolescence, their emotional needs secondary to the family's survival. Even into the 19th and early 20th centuries, strict discipline and emotional restraint were the cultural norms. Our parents, and their parents before them, were raised in these traditions. They carried forward the unspoken rule that emotions were luxuries, that tenderness was dangerous, that love was proven through duty rather than affection. And so, when they raised us, many did the only thing they knew. They repeated the cycle. Yet, while history offers explanation, it does not offer healing. We may understand why they acted as they did, but understanding does not erase the loneliness of a child waiting to be embraced. It does not quiet the critical voice that grew inside us when approval was withheld. It does not soften the ache of abandonment when presence was promised, but never delivered. This is the paradox. The past cannot be rewritten, but its influence lingers. It lingers in how we choose partners who mirror old wounds, in how we fear success or failure with equal intensity, in how we silence our own desires to please others. These are not random quirks of personality. They are the invisible weight of childhood pressing against our present. But here is where curiosity must begin. If we are to move forward, we must first turn back. We must dare to examine not just what happened in our childhoods, but what continues to live from them inside us. Because healing does not begin with blame. It begins with awareness. Maybe you grew up with a father who was physically present, but emotionally absent. He sat at the dinner table, but his mind was always elsewhere, on work, on obligations, on burdens he never spoke about. As a child, you sensed his distance but could never name it. And now, as an adult, you find yourself struggling to trust, always fearing that those you love will eventually walk away. Or perhaps your mother carried a voice sharper than any blade. She loved you, yes, but her love came wrapped in criticism. No achievement was ever enough, no effort flawless. Over time, her words took root in your mind, transforming into an inner whisper that follows you into adulthood. You're not good enough. And maybe you learned something even more dangerous at a young age, the art of silence. You learned to suppress your desires, to to bury your emotions, to become what others wanted. Because every time you expressed yourself honestly, you were met with disapproval, with punishment, or with a cold, impenetrable wall of silence. To survive, you became the pleaser, and in doing so, you abandoned yourself. These wounds do not disappear when we age. They do not dissolve simply because we've built careers, relationships, and adult responsibilities. They remain buried deep within, hidden in the shadowed corridors of the psyche, quietly shaping our emotions, our choices, our relationships. They are like old scripts etched into our unconscious, scripts we keep performing without realizing we never wrote them. That is why so many of us feel trapped in repetitive cycles, living out the same pain in different scenarios. An argument with a partner feels strangely familiar, echoing a fight you witnessed as a child. A boss's criticism sends you spiraling into shame, as if you were once again that vulnerable child in need of approval. Life begins to resemble an endless loop, an emotional déjà vu. History, too, is filled with these cycles. Generations replay patterns as though bound by an invisible hand. A father raised in silence becomes a man who does not know how to speak love. A mother shamed in her youth becomes a woman who passes that same shame onto her children. Trauma does not vanish. It is transmitted, reshaped, reborn in each generation until someone dares to break the chain. But here lies the first key to liberation. Healing does not begin by pointing fingers or assigning blame. It begins with awareness. Awareness that our parents, too, were once children, that they carried their own invisible shadows, and that what they gave us was filtered through the limits of their understanding. To heal is not to excuse, but to see clearly. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting, nor does it mean pretending it didn't hurt. It means refusing to carry the burden any longer. It means choosing to end the cycle so that it does not pass through us to those we love. It means, finally, stepping out of the shadow of the past and into the possibility of a different future. Our childhood is not a chapter we leave behind. It is the soil from which the roots of our identity grow. Within it, the first seeds of belief are planted. Beliefs about love, about trust, about safety, about our own worth. If those seeds are nurtured in soil rich with compassion, patience, and presence, they grow into strong roots. But if planted in soil poisoned by neglect, fear, or criticism, the roots twist and spread in ways that shape us long after we've forgotten where they began. Carl Jung understood this intimately. He taught that unresolved childhood experiences do not disappear. They sink into the unconscious, waiting to surface. They are not buried corpses, they are living patterns, quietly influencing our every choice. The praise we did or didn't receive, the boundaries that were too rigid or too loose, the love we had to earn or were denied. These experiences become the blueprint for our adult lives. Consider a child who grows up believing love must be earned. Perhaps they discovered early that only by achieving, through perfect grades, flawless obedience, or endless sacrifice, could they secure a parent's affection. This child, now grown, may still chase validation endlessly, exhausting themselves in their career, relationships, even friendships, all in pursuit of a fleeting sense of worth. Their unconscious has decided, love is conditional. If I fail, I am unlovable. Or imagine a child raised in an atmosphere of judgment, where mistakes were not seen as part of learning, but as proof of failure. Shame was the response, not guidance. That child grows into an adult, haunted by perfectionism, terrified of failure, sabotaged by a relentless inner critic. Even small setbacks trigger a flood of shame, as though their very existence is under scrutiny. This is the tragedy of childhood wounds. What began as a defense mechanism becomes a life pattern. A child suppresses anger to avoid punishment. As an adult, they struggle to assert boundaries, fearing conflict. A child hides sadness because tears are mocked. As an adult, they become numb, unable to process grief or ask for comfort. And the unconscious has a strange loyalty. It seeks not what is healthy, but what is familiar. That is why someone raised in chaos may find themselves repeatedly drawn to unstable relationships. That is why those raised in emotional coldness often choose partners who withhold affection. The unconscious whispers, "This feels like home." And so pain is repeated, dressed in new faces, new places, but always the same echo. We see this in history, too. Across centuries, children raised in war often became adults who knew only how to pass on discipline and survival skills, not tenderness. In Victorian households, where children should be seen and not heard, silence became generational. Even in modern times, phrases like "boys don't cry" or "good girls don't talk back" are remnants of cultural conditioning that turn into lifelong scripts. These phrases, spoken casually, mold identities as surely as iron-shaped steel. But here is the crucial insight. These patterns are not fate. They are the unconscious directing our lives until we become aware. Awareness is the first act of rebellion against inheritance. To say, "This story shaped me, but it does not have to define me," is to reclaim authorship over one's own life. Our roots explain us, but they do not imprison us. And the moment we recognize that truth, the possibility of transformation begins. It's important to be clear. This is not about placing the full weight of our suffering on our parents' shoulders. They, too, were shaped by their own stories, their own wounds, their own shadows. A father who could not express affection may have grown up in a home where tenderness was mocked as weakness. A mother who demanded perfection may have once been a child desperate for approval she never received. They did not invent the burdens they carried. They inherited them. And without awareness, they passed them down. But the echoes remain alive in us, whether or not we understand their origin. How can we know when our childhood wounds are still active? The signs are rarely subtle. One of the clearest is the presence of triggering emotions, reactions that feel far larger than the situation that sparked them. A passing comment from a colleague feels like a deep betrayal. A partner's criticism, however small, ignites a storm of defensiveness. In those moments, we are not simply reacting to the present, we are reliving the past. Imagine a child taught in words or gestures that love was conditional. As an adult, every critique feels like a threat to their very worth. Their unconscious whispers, "If you are not perfect, you will not be loved." The sting of rejection in the present moment is magnified by the echo of abandonment long ago. Another sign is the repetition of painful patterns. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." This fate often looks like déjà vu, relationships that feel hauntingly familiar, conflicts that repeat with different faces, mistakes that unfold as if scripted. We find ourselves caught in loops, replaying pain we never resolved. Consider the person terrified of abandonment. They may fall into relationships where they constantly seek reassurance, overextend themselves, or cling desperately to partners who are emotionally distant. Without realizing it, they recreate the very vacuum they once feared. Or think of the person who cannot shake the feeling they don't deserve success. Deep down, they may sabotage opportunities as though punishing themselves for wanting what they were once told they did not deserve. History is written in such repetitions, not just individually, but collectively. Entire societies have carried forward the echoes of unhealed wounds. Post-war generations raised by traumatized parents often grew up with emotional restraint, mistrust of vulnerability, and survival-first instincts. In some cultures, silence itself became a form of inheritance. Children were not told the full stories of the past, but they carried the weight nonetheless. The echoes, whether personal or generational, shape us in ways both subtle and profound. They guide how we love, how we fear, how we interpret the world. They can become so familiar that we mistake them for who we are. But they are not identity. They are inheritance. And like all inheritances, we have a choice: to carry them unchanged or to transform them into something new. Awareness is the beginning. It does not erase the wound, but it brings it into the light. And in the light, healing can begin. There is another way our unconscious speaks to us, through dreams. For Carl Jung, dreams were not meaningless fragments of imagination. They were coded messages, letters sent from the hidden depths of the psyche. They reveal what the conscious mind refuses to face, whispering truths in symbols and metaphors. Think of a dream where you are being chased. To the conscious mind, it seems random, even absurd. But Jung would ask, what are you running from in your waking life? What truth? What memory? What emotion feels too dangerous to face? That shadow, hidden and unacknowledged, pursues you even in sleep. Or consider the dream of a collapsing house. To Jung, the house often represents the self, the psyche, the structure of our inner world. A house falling apart in a dream may point to a neglected part of the self, an inner foundation weakened by years of silence, criticism, or denial. And so the dream becomes a warning: rebuild, restore, or risk collapse. Authority figures appear often in dreams too: teachers, bosses, faceless parents. They are not random visitors. They often symbolize the internalized voices of authority that still live within us. If you grew up never feeling accepted, always seeking approval, these figures remind you of the old wound. They carry the echo of childhood judgments into your adult nights. Dreams, in their way, preserve the ancient role of myth and storytelling. Across cultures, dreams were believed to be portals to hidden truths. Ancient Egyptians saw dreams as divine instructions. In Greek temples, seekers slept in hopes of healing visions from the gods. Indigenous cultures across the Americas interpreted dreams as pathways to understanding one's spirit and ancestors. Jung stood in this long tradition, insisting that dreams connect us to the unconscious that never sleeps. But perhaps the most unsettling truth is that our unconscious does not seek what is good for us. It seeks what is familiar. That is why a child raised in inconsistency may, as an adult, feel inexplicably drawn to chaotic relationships. They call it passion, intensity, or fate, but beneath it lies a repetition. The unconscious recreating the very instability it once knew. A person raised in emotional distance may find themselves attached to partners who cannot give warmth because coldness feels like home. The unconscious is never silent. If ignored, it speaks louder. It repeats patterns in our waking life. It bleeds into our dreams. It insists that we look at what we have buried. And if we refuse, the cost is high: confusion, broken relationships, cycles of suffering that feel like destiny. But destiny is not the truth. Destiny is the unconscious left unexamined. And dreams, if we dare to listen, are the map showing us the way back to ourselves. Carl Jung gave a name to the hidden, unacknowledged side of the psyche: the shadow. It is the collection of traits we reject, deny, or bury because they feel too painful, or because someone once told us they were unacceptable. And though we may keep them hidden, they remain alive, shaping our choices in ways we cannot see. When it comes to family, the shadow is often passed on like an heirloom. We inherit not only eye color or physical traits, but also silence, shame, fear, and patterns of emotional behavior. A father unable to show affection may not pass down warmth, but he does pass down distance. A mother unable to soothe her own anxieties may unknowingly raise children in an atmosphere of fear. The wounds they never healed become the burdens we must confront. This is why many of us fall into extremes when we think of our parents. Some of us idealize them, telling ourselves they did the best they could until it becomes a shield against painful truth. Others demonize them, turning them into villains in our inner stories. But both extremes miss the reality. Our parents were human beings, shaped by their own shadows. To either worship or despise them is still to remain trapped in their orbit. The paradox is this: even resentment binds us. We believe anger frees us, but it does not. To hate is still to remain tethered. To dwell on the wound is to remain in relationship with it. And in this way, we continue to live under their influence, long after the original moment has passed. Worse still, what we most resent in them often becomes what we repeat in ourselves. The father we accuse of coldness lives on in our own moments of emotional withdrawal. The mother we blame for being overcritical reappears in the harsh voice we use on ourselves or on others. It is easier to point to their flaws than to admit the ways we have carried them forward. This is not new. Across generations and cultures, families transmit more than bloodlines. In traditional societies, silence around trauma, wars, poverty, abuse, ensured that the children carried what the parents could not speak. In modern times, the same silence remains, though it wears different clothes. Parents who say, "I don't want to talk about the past," or "We survived, so you'll be fine." The shadow persists, even in unspoken words. The family shadow, then, is not just about what we remember. It is about what we unconsciously live. Until we bring those shadows into the light, we remain prisoners of repetition. We become the very people we swore we'd never be. And the most difficult truth is this: to heal, we must not only face their shadows, but also our own. When we refuse to face what lives in our shadow, it doesn't vanish. It escapes into the world around us. This is the psychological mechanism Carl Jung called projection. We see in others what we cannot bear to acknowledge in ourselves. The parts of us we reject, the anger, the fear, the coldness, reappear in our partners, our friends, even our children. The unconscious mind shields us from self-confrontation by making the problem appear external. But in doing so, it keeps us trapped. Think of the child raised by excessively demanding parents. That child may grow into an adult who never stops pushing themselves, never resting, always chasing perfection. Or they may turn the inner critic outward, becoming sharply judgmental of others, repeating the harsh voices of the past. Another example, someone who grew up in a home where love was inconsistent, one day embraced, the next ignored, may find themselves drawn, again and again, to chaotic relationships. To outsiders, it looks like bad luck. To the unconscious, it feels like home. We repeat, because the familiar feels safer than the unknown, even when it hurts. This is the cruel loyalty of the unconscious. It will lead us back to the wound, again and again, as if insisting, "Face this, heal this. Until then, you cannot be free." Consider how often we find ourselves attracted to people who resemble our parents, not just in appearance, but in emotional patterns. The strict father reappears in the authoritarian boss. The distant mother lives on in a partner who withholds affection. This is no accident. On some hidden level, the psyche hopes to rewrite the story, to finally win the love it once lacked. But healing does not come from repeating the pattern. It comes from breaking it. History itself reflects this truth. Nations traumatized by war often recreate cycles of violence, mistaking repetition for strength. Families marked by poverty may pass down scarcity thinking, even when abundance is possible. The unconscious seeks what is familiar, whether in an individual life or across generations. There is a simple but powerful exercise worth trying. Think about the traits in your parents that bothered you the most. Were they authoritarian, cold, controlling, critical? Now ask yourself with brutal honesty, in what ways have I carried those same traits forward? Perhaps not in obvious form, but in subtle habits, in how you speak to yourself, in how you treat those closest to you. What we reject in our parents often becomes what we unknowingly carry within. And here lies the irony. Many of us live as fugitives from the very patterns we unconsciously replicate. We say, "I'll never be like them." Yet in moments of stress, anger, or fear, their words emerge from our mouths. Their silences repeat in our relationships. Their wounds echo through our choices. The truth is clear. The unconscious does not care about our promises. It cares about familiarity. Until we confront it, until we make the shadow visible, we are doomed to repeat it. Carl Jung believed that the goal of life is not perfection, but wholeness. He called this process individuation, the integration of all parts of our psyche, both light and shadow, into a unified self. Individuation is not about becoming someone new. It is about becoming fully ourselves, no longer ruled by unconscious wounds, but guided by conscious choice. The first step is perhaps the hardest. Acknowledge the wound without victimhood. We cannot heal what we refuse to name. That means admitting that childhood left marks, some subtle, some deep. It is not about blaming forever or remaining trapped in anger. It is about giving pain a name, without allowing it to define the whole of who we are. The second step is to embrace the shadow without fear. What we reject in ourselves often ends up controlling us. If we deny our anger, it seeps out in resentment. If we deny our fear, it disguises itself as control. Jung warned that until we confront the shadow, we will keep projecting it onto the world. Embracing it is not about glorifying our darkness. It is about meeting it with honesty. The third step is to see our parents with clarity. Neither idealize them as flawless heroes, nor vilify them as ruthless villains. Instead, see them as human beings, flawed, wounded, shaped by their own limitations. This does not excuse the pain they caused, but it allows us to step out of the child's perspective. Real healing begins when we stop expecting them to become the parents we wished for, and instead give ourselves the love and validation we once sought from them. The fourth step is to consciously decide who we want to be. This is the essence of individuation. We cannot change the past, but we can choose how we respond to it. Will we continue living out unconscious patterns, or will we reclaim authorship over our own story? There are countless examples of this transformation. Those who once suffered abandonment have learned to become their own source of safety, building relationships rooted in trust rather than fear. Those who lived in fear of rejection discovered that their worth is not negotiable, that it does not depend on others' approval. Those who felt they were never enough have realized the only approval they truly need is their own. Cultures throughout history have expressed this journey in myth and story. The hero who enters the dark forest, confronts the monster, and returns transformed. This is individuation in symbolic form. The monster is the shadow, the forest is the unconscious, and the treasure brought back is self-awareness. We are each, in our own way, called to this journey. To choose individuation is to choose freedom. It is to say, I am not only my wound, I am not only my past, I am also my future. It is to step out of repetition and into creation, to take the fragments of our identity and weave them into a whole. The final step of healing is perhaps the most misunderstood: forgiveness. Not as a favor to our parents, not because they deserve it, but as an act of liberation for ourselves. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting what happened. It does not mean saying, "It wasn't so bad." It means refusing to let the pain continue to rule our lives. It means choosing not to carry a weight that was never meant to be ours forever. Many of us spend years waiting for the apology that never comes. We cling to the hope that our parents will one day acknowledge the hurt they caused, but waiting for this moment often becomes another prison, another way we give our power away. True healing comes when we stop waiting for justice from the past and instead begin creating peace in the present. A powerful exercise can help. Take a sheet of paper and write a letter to your parent, raw, unfiltered, filled with every word you've never said. Rage, grief, sorrow, longing, let them all spill out. Then take another sheet and write a response as if you were your parent. Not to excuse them, but to see their story through different eyes. Imagine their wounds, their fears, the burdens they carried long before you were born. This is not about justifying them. It is about releasing yourself from the chains of one perspective. Jung reminded us, what we do not make conscious will return as fate. If we remain shackled to anger, the patterns repeat. If we cling to resentment, we stay bound to the very people we resent. Forgiveness is not weakness. It is the refusal to keep reliving the same story. It is the choice to write a new one. Transformation begins when we turn pain into wisdom. The wound that once defined us becomes the source of strength that guides us. The child who felt abandoned can grow into an adult who builds a life of deep belonging. The one who felt unworthy can discover unshakable self-respect. The one raised in silence can learn to speak with courage, breaking the generational pattern forever. This is not just psychology. It is the story of humanity itself. Every culture tells tales of descent and return, of pain that leads to transformation. The phoenix burns before it rises. The seed must break apart before it can grow. In the same way, our suffering, when faced honestly, becomes the soil of renewal. The truth is simple, yet profound. Nothing you experienced was in vain. Every disappointment, every tear, every wound carries within it the possibility of rebirth. You cannot change the past, but you can change your relationship with it. And in that choice lies freedom. So ask yourself, will you remain a prisoner of your story, or will you use your story as the foundation for wisdom? Healing does not erase what happened. It transforms what it means. And when you transform the meaning, you transform yourself. If this resonates with you, it is not by accident. It means something within you is ready to face the shadow, ready to forgive, ready to reclaim the life that has always been waiting. Your past does not define you. Your choices do. You have the power to turn your wounds into wisdom, your pain into purpose, and your story into light for others still lost in the dark. And that journey, your journey, has already begun.